Elijah Rawls. I'm an Officer of Sessions recruiter with the U.S. Air Force. I'm currently assigned 348 Recruiting Squadron, Hill Air Force Base, Utah. I am the Air Force nurse recruiter for Northern California and Reno. And yes, that does include the Bay Area. Today is May 1st, 2024, and I have the pleasure of speaking to Lieutenant Colonel Danielle Merritt, Commander, 9th Operational Medical Squadron, Beale Air Force Base, California. Did I get that right?
Close. My squadron is actually Operational Medical Readiness Squadron. Please put that in there.
That is a mouthful there. Okay. We are filming today from Beale Air Force Base. What a strange place, huh?
Yes, definitely remote.
Cows on base, cattle fields, and dragon ladies overhead.
Yes.
It is a strange place. Probably the weirdest base I've ever been to.
The only Air Force base that has a cowboy on staff.
Yeah. Probably more cows here than people. How many people do you have here?
I believe we have about 7,000 if you include our tenant units,
Okay.
and I think you saw the cow counter.
2,000 something? Yeah,
They're giving us a run.
All right, if you're wondering what this series is all about, please go back, check out our intro video. I'm going to dive into the purpose behind that whole series. In short, what we're trying to do here is really just drive genuine insight about Air Force Nurse Corps from Air Force nurses. We've got Nurses Week coming up next week, and we really just want to dig into the career fields, peel back the layers of this onion, and really talk about what nurses do in the Air Force. Yes, it is a thing. Without further ado, let's rock and roll. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Colonel, where are you from? Let's talk background leading up to your military service and why Air Force. What led you here?
So thank you for your time and thank you for the question. I am a born and raised Kansas girl. Sometimes you can hear a little bit of a Midwestern or even Southern drawl.
A little twang?
Yeah, a little twang. But yes, I am from the heartland. Went to the University of Kansas on, just an academic scholarship, and I graduated from there with my nursing degree in 2006. So that's where I'm from, and my family all still resides in Kansas.
Okay. 2006, leading up to 2007 when you came in the Air Force. How did you come about this whole decision? How did this happen?
So I remember I was in nursing school. It was the beginning of my last semester, and we had a new teacher come in to teach one of our intensive care rotations.
Right.
And she got up there and she said, "So I'm new, I just want to tell you a little bit about me." She started to say that she was captain, and then she caught herself and she's like, "Oh, sorry, I just left active duty." And she throws a couple pictures up that she was a flight nurse in Japan, and several of us were like, the military has nurses?
And she was teaching.
And she was teaching. And so after the class, I went down and I spoke with her, and she told me a little bit about the things that she'd gotten to do during her active duty nursing career. And then I went and talked to a recruiter. A recruiter actually then came to talk to the rest of my nursing school. But yeah, that's kind of what happened. It was accidental. I not from a military family and didn't know that I would ever be joining, but just kind of started asking the questions and then got curious.
Gotcha. Did you have ROTC at your college or not?
We did, but not for the nursing program. So a lot of the ROTC students there end up being like missileers or engineers and stuff.
Regular Air Force stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you are interested in Air Force, there's a lot of different ways you can become an Air Force officer. Nursing just so happens to be one of those specialties. There's a ton more. Speaking of specialties, so inside of nursing, what's your specialty, or what was your specialty coming in? So
I was a brand new nurse. So even though I graduated in 2006, I was waiting for a COT date. I got a job at a local hospital just to buy time and, as my dad would say, be a productive member of society. But when I joined the Air Force, one of the reasons why I joined was I love labor and delivery. And in the civilian sector, it is very difficult to become a labor and delivery nurse right out of school. They want you to have a lot of experience, understandably so, because every patient that walks through is actually two or more, right? The mom and the baby or babies. And when I spoke with the Air Force recruiter, he was like, "We can actually get you into OB right off the bat." And I was like, "What?" Because I'd been applying to all these hospitals, and even though I was graduating at the top of my nursing class and had done my whole entire practicum in OB, that wasn't enough experience to hire at the local places. So for me, that was a great opportunity. I got to sort of pick where I wanted to go. They gave me these list of places, and what the Air Force did was they brought me in. They sent me to COT, obviously. After COT, I went to the nurse transition program at Wright Pat, which was 12 weeks. Then reported to my first duty station, which was Wilford Hall down in San Antonio. And then from there, I did 6 weeks specialty in obstetrics.
Gotcha.
It's now a longer course, but it's basically perinatal and obstetrics and all that. So yeah, it was a great benefit. It allowed me to do the type of nursing that I had wanted to do that I was not going to be able to do probably for 5 to 8 years average where I was from.
So 17 years ago, obviously now they have NTP, Nurse Transition Program. Was NTP a thing then or no?
NTP was a thing. What we have now is also nurse residency program.
NRP.
NRP, which actually I have been a nurse residency program director at Brooke Army Medical Center. And so yeah, it's another extended portion of just following you through those first few years of being a nurse. You know, there's so much in the military, you know, on top of being a new nurse and learning your technical skills, you have to learn how to be an officer. And so this program is part mentorship in being a nurse and opening that aperture of all the opportunities that we'll talk about here in a little bit that the Air Force can offer you, but also things on the officer side of the house, like how you can grow your career into leadership or academics or things that by no fault of their own aren't necessarily offered at civilian institutions.
Gotcha. Yeah, so for any new grads that are listening, watching, NTP, NRP, definitely, if you find a recruiter, ask your recruiter about that. If you're in the Bay Area, you want to talk to a recruiter about that, we will have in the show notes our email to reach out to us. So your prior experience, that was one thing I was going to ask you. You had no prior experience. You were a new grad, literally straight off the street, coming out of college. No previous experience at all, so that's pretty awesome. So when you graduated, you took the NCLEX and then ended up joining post-NCLEX, or did you take NCLEX as you were working with the recruiter? As
I was working, so most states do, I think all states do this, you can work as a graduate nurse, a GN. So I had, again, my last semester of college, I was speaking with a recruiter, was really leaning towards it, but knew that I needed to pass the NCLEX to do it. There's no rush to take the NCLEX right after graduation. You have however many days, or actually it's a few months to take it. So the whole pursuit was to graduate with the NCLEX and then get a COT date and go on. So I was talking with a recruiter, continuing to learn about all the benefits, and yeah.
Okay. Your process, so going back to that, I know it's, you and I both came in 2007. Today is actually my 17th anniversary, May 1. But yeah, before we get into assignments, talking about that recruiting process, you remember your recruiter? Can you talk about that recruiting experience? Like, how was your recruiter? How long was that process? Because now it seems like, I'm the recruiter, and a lot of times what applicants want to know is, well, how long is this going to take, Sarge? And right now what we're seeing is it can take anywhere from 6 months to as long as 12 months for someone to get through this whole process of interviews, putting a package together, meeting board, and then for a new grad to actually get into NTP, NRP, whether that be shipping in October or shipping again in March. How long was that for you?
So I graduated in May. I took my NCLEX in July. I did some traveling there and again got a job. I had been talking to my recruiter the whole time. He was very honest with me. There was an opportunity to get me into a fall COT date, but he had on good authority that some incentive packages were going to be changing that year. And he was like, I think if you can wait until after the fiscal year, I can offer you something better. Prior to me joining, the option was loan repayment or a sign-on bonus, and I was going to be one of the first years potentially on the block to offer both. So sign up for 6 years instead of 4 and get your loans repaid and a nice little bonus. And at that point I was like, well, what's a couple months? I'll travel, I'll go back home, live with my family, see them, and then see what's on the table. So then really from October, it just happened very quickly. Signed some papers in November, did my interview at Whiteman Air Force Base, and then I was off to COT after that whole, holiday season in March.
Gotcha. And your first contract you signed, how long?
6 years.
Okay. So
yeah.
That process has definitely changed because now, we're looking at a 3-year commitment. Obviously, there are 4-year options as well for those accession bonuses you talked about. But yeah, that's wild. 6 years for an officer. That's a big commitment on the nursing side. It's wild.
It is.
All right, so let's dive into assignments.
Okay.
where have you been, and where are you going? But really, let's just talk assignments. Where have you been?
Sure. So like I said, being from a small town in Kansas, they gave me a list of where I wanted to go for my first assignment. And San Antonio was on the list, and I thought, hot dog, let's go there. That sounds big. Little did I know that Wilford Hall was infamous at the time. It still is, but more in a relic of the past. But it was the flagship in the Department of Defense at the time. And so that was, they saw civilian traumas, even in obstetrics. I have many stories of taking care of civilian trauma cases and everything. So it was quite the example in the Air Force and at times the Department of Defense for military health care. So I was very fortunate to have that as my first assignment. While I was there, I did deploy to Iraq, spent 6.5 months there. Actually found out while I was there that I was getting orders to Italy. So I kind of really didn't ever go back to Wilford.
Good problem.
I know, everyone was so jealous. So I had this lieutenant get USAFE right off the bat. So went to Italy. Loved it there. Spent a couple years there. Then came back stateside to Langley. After Langley, I did Wilford Hall again, but at the wing level, so not inpatient care. Then I went up the road to BAMC, worked alongside the Army for a little bit.
Okay.
From there, I went to the Hill on a Congressional fellowship.
Let's go back to BAMC. So
Sure.
for those that don't understand acronyms, let's break that down.
Sorry, Brooke Army Medical Center.
Okay.
So San Antonio is still the hub of military medicine. In fact, they call it, Military City USA. And you've got Brooke Army Medical Center, a little bit north, in the north kind of side of town. And then you've got still the Wilford Hall, Lackland down on the south. And together they are the San Antonio Military Medicine complex. So yes.
Okay.
Was there.
All right. After there, anywhere else?
So after, then I did the fellowship on Capitol Hill.
Okay.
Then I did a follow-on in Congressional Affairs with the Surgeon General, and then I got picked up for command, and I'm here.
So that's a mouthful. So Congressional, let's go back to the whole DC, Congressional, all these big terms, lingo. What happened there? SG, Surgeon General, it sounds like a lot of Chinese lingo.
It does. So in the Nurse Corps, you are afforded opportunities to apply for career broadening fellowships.
Okay.
There are also some that you're eligible to apply for that are Air Force fellowships that you compete with anybody, like line officers and everything.
Right.
But I threw my name in the hat for a fellowship that comes around every 2 to 3 years, and it's the Air Force Surgeon General's Congressional Fellowship. And what it is you get to go up to the Hill for 18 months. You'll do 6 months in working for the Secretary of the Air Force in their Legislative Liaison Division. Okay. So I worked in SAF LL. And then I did a year on the Hill in the U.S. House of Representatives. So I had 78 members of Congress in my portfolio, and it was my job to work Department of the Air Force priorities. So making sure that what was a priority to the DAF writ large was communicated, both to the Hill, and then the Hill priorities were communicated back to the Pentagon. Like, hey, this is what they're thinking. It was a, once in a lifetime opportunity. Right. I actually got to brief General Brown and General Raymond and at the time Acting Secretary Roth on congressional priorities and prep them for their congressional testimonies. And then again, after that, my follow-on was with the Office of the Surgeon General being his Deputy Director of Congressional Affairs.
Gotcha.
So working that National Defense Authorization language with subject matter experts, and again, making sure that the department's priorities as it pertains to medical care were in there.
Interesting.
It was
that's a lot going on there.
quite a ways from delivering babies prior.
For sure. Definitely strategic, big 30,000 foot picture, right? Air Force.
Definitely.
All right, so moving on from assignments, let's talk travel opportunities, TDYs. We can go back to deployments. I love to talk about deployments. Honestly, me speaking about that, a lot of people ask me, well, what about deployments and what about war? Isn't that scary? Honestly, my time in theater, my time in deployments have been the best time in my career, and the best travel opportunities as well. But I'm not going to speak to that. I'm a fireman. I'm not a nurse. I'm going to let you take that. Let's talk travel opportunities. Let's talk deployments, TDYs.
Sure, absolutely. So we'll speak selfishly on the personal travel side.
Okay.
So during my time being stationed in Europe, and then all the other places throughout the continental U.S. that I've been able to travel, and then making friends and visiting them in PACAF, so the Pacific side, I have been to 29 countries. That's a far cry from the wheat fields of Kansas.
Right.
And really those are opportunities that were afforded to me because of the Air Force. Some of them were free because I would have to go places and train and just experience a whole new culture. Less about travel, especially because COVID, but another way to immerse yourself in world culture is I am an instructor for the Defense Institute of Medical Operations. It's called DEMO. I specialize in instructing on human trafficking, gender violence, protection against women, and I've taught about 30 different countries in Africa and in Central America.
Awesome.
Sometimes you get to go to those places and teach, but
Right.
you know, during COVID it was virtual, but still working with leading governments and military people from around the world in very crucial topics and aspects. So that's a little bit on the travel side, like the selfish part that you get to experience. Right. And then TDYs, you know, one of the benefits, training and credentialing and kind of proof of concept and your subject matter experts is a necessary requirement of employment in the Air Force, especially to grow throughout your career. And the beauty is, if the Air Force says you have to have it, they're also going to pay for it. So you get to go to conferences, you get to go to training, both with other services in other countries. I've gotten to do exercises with, I did Air Mobility Guardian a few years ago, probably about 7 years ago now, but 13 countries from around the world came and we got to put together a tent city and, you know, do air operations. So there's a lot of training and travel within that training that is afforded to you, and then just all the other things that come with it.
What about, so when I think medical, I mean, obviously for us coming into recruiting, you know, we're not nurses at the end of the day, we're recruiters and we all have our specialties, right? Whatever that may be, mine was fire department. But when you deploy, when I think medical, yes, we have deployments, but we also have the humanitarian side of the house. Have you had any experience with humanitarians? So some of the DEMO stuff falls under humanitarians. I have been part of readying teams, so we've sent people to many countries in Central and South America for other healthcare humanitarian missions. There are opportunities. That has not been something that I have participated in, but they absolutely are there. To speak back to deployment, especially because a lot of times people ask me, you know, because I've deployed a couple times, they're like, but you're OB, are you delivering babies overseas? And I'm not. So, I mean, there are some foundational nursing skills that are just, right, like universal. Not to mention, you do spin up. So when I went to Iraq, I actually worked in the emergency department. And I had a lot of spin up leading up to that, sending me to all types of courses to prepare me for that environment. Right. Same with other deployments. So no, I don't do labor and delivery when I am deployed. Right. And to echo what you have said, it has absolutely been the most humbling experience that I have gotten to have. So you've been in 17 years.
Yes.
I've been in 17 years. Yes. Out of those 17, that's one thing people want to know is how often are you deploying? And I always tell people it depends on your job, it depends on the tempo, the deployment. There's a lot of variables in there, right? In your case, 17 years, how many times have you deployed?
I've deployed twice. Okay. Officially. I've done some other things. Right. I guess the point is you're absolutely right. For being honest brokers, it depends on the type of nursing that you are. So for instance, in my career field, I am atypical. You might find an OB nurse who's never deployed. Right. But I asked for my first deployment, they sent me on it, and then kind of once I was in rotation, I would ask again. If you are a critical care nurse, so ICU or some sort, you will get tapped more often. ER, man, back in the day, ER was going all the time. Obviously, the geopolitical landscape has changed, so the ops tempo and deployment has changed, and the future fight is going to be different as well. So people are deploying less and less to those austere conditions. But I'm not gonna lie, There are still some out there. We do still have people going out the door, but they are fewer and farther between.
Okay. All right. Benefits. There's a ton of benefits when it comes to Air Force, and a lot of us as Air Force members, especially you and I that have been in 17 plus years, we tend to look over a lot of those as the years go by. It's just like one of those things that's a given. But for a lot of folks that are coming in the door, some of these benefits could be a big deal. In your time of serving, you can think hard on this one. What do you think has been the most beneficial benefit to you or your family, Air Force-wide benefits?
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially as you look out at what the civilian sector happen to be offering nurses now, especially if you have the ability to travel and do travel nursing, you really kind of start to compete with one of the few things that the Air Force had going for them, like, we'll send you anywhere and we'll pay and it'll be great. But one thing remains true, like one is the healthcare. I don't have to pay for my health care, and it can seem very insignificant when you are a healthy population, but as you get married, as you have children, as your family constellation grows, that becomes a significant factor. The other thing is paid leave. You get 30 days of paid leave a year and unlimited con leave, if you think about it. You know, I recently had a physician assistant, she broke her shoulder. She was out for several weeks with getting the surgery, and then several more weeks of rehab, and then she finally came back, but she was on light duty, and she actually was set to separate and canceled her separation because she realized all the things that the Air Force had afforded to her, those would have been directly impacting her paycheck, on top of probably paying for her medical bills, despite having amazing insurance. Some things just aren't comparable. So that is probably the biggest thing. I will also say, having had friends who left the Air Force and then came back, because that was a significant factor.
Okay, that's good. Not something I would think about con leave. You really don't think about that.
You don't.
But you talk about kids and the whole having health insurance. I could definitely speak to that, and seeing folks that have had kids, how much childbirth costs and having insurance cover that. And then if you have kids that have any sort of medical condition, we literally have EFMP, Exceptional Family Member Program, that supports you and your family along the whole way. But the benefits are endless.
Absolutely.
Education. This seems to be a big one with a lot of people I speak to, whether they're fully qualified or college graduates. Education. They all want to go further. Maybe they have their BSN, they want their master's. Maybe they have their master's, they want the DNP. Maybe they have their DNP, they want to specialize in psych or FNP or whatever it may be. Let's talk education. HPERB, another acronym, fellowship opportunities, just education in nursing. What does it look like?
Awesome. So I think the chief nurse will be the best one to talk about that, but I can tell you a little bit. And so one, I joined with my bachelor's. I'm a nerd at heart. I wanted to continue with school. The Air Force has the tuition assistance program. Because of my GPA, I actually earned my master's for $0.00, because what the military paid for in the tuition assistance program, the school matched it, plus mailed me my books. So I got a free master's degree. I started my doctorate with my GI Bill because I still had that left over. It is conceivable that by the time I leave the Air Force, I will have my doctorate and have paid nothing throughout the course of any of my education in my lifetime. So that's a huge thing. So that's my avenue, and that's how I received my advanced degrees, because I didn't want to do clinical nursing. So my master's is in leadership and organizational development. That's what my doctorate is geared towards. So
my bachelor's is in.
Oh, see? But that being said, so that's what I wanted to do, and some nurses do that. You can also do hospital administration or anything like that. But there are also AFIT, the Air Force Institute of Technology. We have that where people can apply and be picked up and go to school full-time. Yep. On active orders, but be a full-time student and get, like you said, like their DNP or a clinical nurse specialist. There's
CRNA.
Yes, CRNA. There's so many degree options out there. The other thing is you can do what I did, right? Like use your tuition assistance in combination with whatever to pay for it, and do SOPN, which is your self-obtained advanced practice nursing. So say I didn't get into the AFB program, like I really wanted to be a pediatric nurse practitioner, but it's a competitive program. Like just because you apply doesn't mean you're going to get it. And you tried and you didn't get it, but you're like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and start it on my own. You know, you complete it. Then once you get your board license, you can actually then petition the Air Force to say, hey, I know I'm a registered nurse, but now that I've earned my pediatric nurse practitioner, my PNP, I want to be recognized at that. So you go to the board again, you compete. And I have had several friends that have been picked up because they were passed over for the competitive program in the Air Force, like the active duty side, like earning it by being paid and going to school full time. They did it full time while, you know, still working in the Air Force. And then they had a follow-on assignment as, you know, a women's health nurse practitioner or a clinical nurse specialist or, you know, midwife. One of my friends just became a midwife. So there are multiple avenues to kind of get to your end goal and still meet the needs of the Air Force.
Okay. And you said that's SOPN. I've never heard that one.
Yes.
It's a new acronym. So you're a language of acronyms.
We sure are.
Last question. Military versus civilian with endless opportunities, pay available throughout the nation for fully qualified and new grads alike. Why Air Force? If you had to tell someone why Air Force, or if you had to tell you 17 years ago, why do this? Why?
So I couldn't know it at the time, but time goes by so quickly. Luckily, somebody told me that, and I thought, hey, what's 6 years? And it did. Next thing, 17 years has gone by, and I swear, just like a year and a half ago, I was a lieutenant. It's crazy. So that's one thing. The time's going to go by anyway. Why not try something different? Okay. Like you said, there are lucrative joining options. And if you want to know why the Air Force over any other service, come on. What is cooler than flying planes and supporting the skies? But honestly, it's the pride in the service. Going back to being deployed, which is a unique opportunity and what your nation has called you to do, and getting to wear the cloth of our nation is just incomparable. So there's really no question.
A small percentage. I think we're less than 1% of the population now.
That is true. Less than 1% now.
Tiny. Yeah, I had it's funny you talk about that. I had a Marine tell me one time, he was actually working for USAA. He was briefing us in an ALS brief, Airman Leadership School, another acronym. We're in a brief, and he's like, look, guys, if you don't like this, just try it. Try it for 20 years. If you don't like it, try something else. I like that.
That's true.
Yeah, I think we're at a good stopping point there. I think that's a wrap. In closing, I would like to thank the 9th Med Group for hosting. This is their conference room, their house. 9th PA for making this happen. Couldn't have done it without them. You know, the show, the equipment, the mics, post-production, all that stuff. Thanks to both Med Group and PA. Furthermore, see show notes below for further details about our speakers. If they're indeed willing to share their information or take Air Force nursing specific questions, we will leave their information. If they're not, we won't. We will leave that in the show notes for how to reach them. As always, if you have recruiting specific questions or are interested in learning more about the Air Force, check us out, airforce.com. You can apply there as well. And lastly, if you are currently a nurse, fully qualified nurse, or graduating in the local area, being the Bay Area, Norcal, Reno, you've got your BSN or you're within 1 year, please reach out to our office. I'll leave our direct email in the show notes as well. Peace.